time to fuel your business success. Welcome to Harmonious at Lunch. We're bringing you bite-sized advice and expert conversations to drive clarity and growth 5 days a week. Make sure you join our Facebook group at humanopt.com/lunch, where listeners like you and our guests hang out so we can find harmony in the business together. If you're building a business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome back into some more bite-sized business advice. In today's episode, I think we're going to have a lot of fun talking to my guests before we started recording. And this is absolutely my jam. We're talking about investing in your people for bigger, better results in your business. So let's just get right into it. Francie Jain, welcome to the show and thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Brandon. I'm delighted to be here.
So the title of the episode is Group Coaching is a Better Investment Than R&D. It's a big claim, but I'm already starting to believe it before we start recording. So why don't you unpack for me really what it is we're talking today about investing in your people, group coaching, and all of the things that you do.
Yeah, so I'm the founder of Terawatt, and we are, the best way to understand it is we are Airbnb for executive coaches.
Is that trademarked, by the way? Did you
No, but I love saying that because everyone gets it immediately. It's like this quickest way for people to understand what I'm talking about. And there's so many like good analogies. But basically the idea is we, believe that everyone's choices and values and perspectives are valid, and we want you to find the absolute right thing that works for you guys. And so I'm a huge believer in like human choice and like people like engagement and people opting in, and I use personally a marketplace whenever possible when I just like do my stuff like use the internet. And so what we have is we have like basically three stakeholders that we serve. We have expert coaches who typically have been coaching for over 10 years and have like a full-time practice. We sell to employers who are buying professional development on behalf of their employees. And so the employees are the users. And so, what we're really always trying to do is like figure out what is their problem that we can help them with and help them create an RFP. And then we send that out to the coaches, and the coaches send proposals. And then we let the buyer choose what works best for them. And then obviously there's a ton of detail in all of that, but that's sort of the basics of like how it works.
Yeah, so I misunderstood that actually. I thought you had the coaches as part of your company, but it's truly a marketplace where the coaches can come in and find what they want to do and apply for those roles.
Yeah, exactly. And so one of the things with expert coaches is that they have a market rate, and they're all over the map. And it's like anything, the market rate probably depends on like where they live or like what their overhead is and all these different things. And so we don't really tell them what it should be. We just say, great, bring, your content, bring yourself, bring your expertise, and we will find you a match. And it works really well for the experts because if they don't use us, they typically have a social media manager, they have a copywriter, they have an assistant, they have all sorts of ways to like generate business. And so we're always looking for like experts who are kind of looking to raise their hand and get more leads.
That's fascinating. Okay,
Yeah.
but I want to talk about the human side, both the company and the user of your service, right? Like, because we're talking about how group coaching is an important investment, and you shared some of the potential ROI when you invest with your human capital. And I really want to unpack this. So what have you found when you invest in people? Like why are you so passionate about this? And why do you also believe that most people totally miss the boat on it?
Yeah. Well, so I think just like a personal value, I just believe that like everyone should have the right to like be great and find what makes their heart sing. And I believe that a rising tide lifts all boats. So I just from that perspective, like to me, like dominating other people is not interesting. Like I think what's cool, like what makes me so inspired is when people are like living their best lives and like really happy. And I also think that like that contributes to like a better community, whatever your community is. But just like when people are happy, you're not trying to dominate other people. You're not trying to limit what other people do because you're sort of doing your own thing and you kind of assume, well, I'm really happy with what I'm doing. Let them do what makes them happy. I mean, as long as it's within the rules, the laws of the country. But I guess
Let's
my
not be
point.
crazy. No, murder
Yeah,
should not make
I'm
anybody happy.
yeah, I just mean more like I think when you're fulfilled, you're less
Yeah.
interested in hemming in other people, is my sense. Um, and um, and so that's kind of like my perspective. And one of the sort of the things that I've realized is that, I'm the age where people become coaches. So I actually have a lot of friends who are executive coaches. And I really started understanding their perspective of the business. And that gave me a lot of sympathy for like their view of how coaching works. And I didn't really tend to do this, but we're really different from most coaching places because we're not a services model, like, right? So a services business, you pay the coach or the input, the widget, whatever that is, right? At some cost, and so the coach has some fixed cost that they are paid, and typically, at these in these big coaching organizations, they pay them very low, very under market. And so that works for some people, but if you've been doing this for 10, 20 years, you don't want to take those roles and you don't. And so, services business will pay a coach to say $30 an hour, then mark it up to a certain amount and then make the spread. That's like a services business model. Whereas a marketplace, we take a percentage of the sale to the buyer. And that works very well for expert coaches because within the coaching space, there's a lot of referral fees that kind of go back and forth when people are sending a client to somebody else who's a better fit.
Yeah, I like that model too because you're right. It's a good place to, I guess, learn is a good way to say it. Get your feet wet in coaching if
Mm,
you've never done it
mm,
before. To say like, okay, I'll go work for an established company. They're gonna make double what I make, if not more, on the markup.
right.
But at least you get the experience, right? Your model, you're attracting higher level coaches, higher level talent to then go into these organizations, which in turn should provide a better service. And I'm sure it does across the board. In those companies, though, talk to me about what companies are seeing as far as the ROI from investing in coaching for their people, and particularly in this format because they can kind of curate the experience that they're looking for, so to speak. So tell me
Yes.
what that looks like from the company perspective.
Yeah. So one thing that we found that's really interesting, and again, it kind of gets back. Okay, it gets back to my belief of just like people opting in, is that we found that when we do a survey for the employees to understand their perspective, and then we base the coaching based on like what their requests are and like what they want to learn about, the engagement's so much higher and people get so much more out of it. And so that's another example of like sometimes there is a disconnect between what the buyer thinks the employees need or want and then what the employees want. And so we try to bridge that gap through surveys. Um, and so just in terms of ROI, like the big ROI case study that I love to talk about has to do with one of our coaches. He's a PhD in I think organizational psychology, and his dad actually in like the 60s like developed um, like a test, a way to like understand the world and understand ourselves. It's called opposite strengths, and it's funny they don't talk about it as a way to learn psychological safety, but it actually is. And so psychological safety is this very important concept that's been around for a while, but was kind of popularized in my mind by Google in 2015, where they found that their best performing teams um, exhibited high level of psychological safety. And what that means is you can ask questions, you can poke holes. The idea is that you are sort of finding potential flaws in the thinking to make a better product and to incorporate more perspectives. Um, anyway, so back to his thing. So his content was used at a large healthcare organization. It was 4,500 people in a smaller town in Colorado. They had a 24% employee turnover rate. The average employee turnover rate is 20%. They were worried because they're not in a huge city. So at some point they kind of like max out on like local people that they can hire. And they decided to bring his content in. And every year that they used it, it was sort of an opt-in, a group learning experience. The CEO was involved. And every year their employee turnover rate dropped 1 to 2% a year, just very consistently. And after 9 years, they had a 4% employee turnover rate, which is effectively zero. People are retiring or, maybe they're moving for other reasons, but the voluntary turnover is like life changes, not kind of like more money or all the typical reasons for people leaving. And so that's great, right? You hear that and you're like, oh my God, 24% to 4%. Yay, good job. Which that was my first thought when I heard that. But actually, when you quantify it in dollars, it's mind blowing. So it's the difference between 24%, the peak, right? When they started this, and then where they ended up with 4% is $32 million a year.
Wow.
Wow. Right. And then they also won all these awards. So what the awards mean that all their metrics were moving in like the right direction, right? The excellence direction, whether it's like lowering or hiring, whatever the thing is, like fewer errors, like happier patient, all these metrics that hospitals use to evaluate themselves. And the point is that, I can guarantee you they were not spending $32 million a year on this, right? They were probably spending some modest amount of money just as like, let's see what happens. And so it's a huge ROI for them. And I think the reason the dollars are so high is because they probably were spending a lot of money on traveling nurses and overtime. So that when they had these gaps, they were just throwing money at the problem instead of thinking about the organizational solution. And another thing I would just always say about that is like what's cool is that with $32 million a year, you have so many choices. Like, do you want to build a new building this year? Do you want to give people raises? Do you want to give people bonuses? Do you want to do more executive coaching? I mean, that you decide, right? And it becomes a priority of the organization, and you're not playing defense anymore, you're playing offense. And I think that's really like the goal of every organization is just to decide their future for themselves when things are working. And then on top of that, I would add what low employee turnover means is that people are happy. These are happy workers who don't want to leave, who also are probably recruiting their friends to come there. So you're also really not paying for retention. I mean, recruitment costs. So it's just like what I love about that story is that there's no downside. I mean, the downside is the cost, but at some point it starts to pay for itself. And then you have this like well-functioning, well-oiled machine, and you don't have to worry about some of these other problems that exist in workplaces like burnout or I don't know, error rate, all these different things that could happen when people aren't working well together.
Yeah, especially in that context, you're working with potentially saving lives. Like lives are literally on the line. And if your people are not in peak condition, if they're fighting with each other and something goes wrong, like somebody would actually die. So is that the case in every single business? No, of course not. But
Right.
in that one, I mean, you need your people optimized. And I think what you said was really cool. You make the shift from defense to offense. It's this snowball effect on either side of if you're constantly just hiring to fill positions because you have such high turnover, you're just at some point you're going to run into warm body syndrome and you're going to be
Right.
hiring the next person that applies because that's all that's there and you need to fill a role and that snowballs out of control. And in some cases it does go out of control. You can't rein it back in and the business ends up dying because the people are the core of the business. You make that shift to offense because you invest in your people, and with $32 million, yeah, your
Yeah.
options are wide open.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's just, and there's another thing I was going to say, but give me a second, I'll remember. But, just the idea of like when things are operating as a system, it's
Mhm.
also just easier to keep that going and you have a nice culture that's like a cultural solution. I don't know. It's just to me, it's like just a great study of like what it could be. And I guess your point, right. So like it's not going to be the same way for every organization. And everyone's different, but like one of the things that I think is cool about Terawatt is, after maybe 9 years, they're like, okay, maybe we want to switch from opposite strengths to a different kind of perspective. Maybe we want to hear from a different person. I don't know that if it's, I mean, I love this opposite strengths, but I don't know if it's necessarily opposite strengths as much as it is everyone learning a new way to connect to each other and to work together and finding ways to again like bring the psychological safety to an organization in a way that people embrace it and don't feel sort of attacked or burdened or negatively towards it.
Yeah, shameless plug. You should try Human Op. I mean, they power this
Yeah.
podcast. Anyway, but okay, I want to talk about the phase two then because it's, I mean, from 24% down to 4% is phenomenal, but there comes a point where you have to continue that. Like you can't just stop and say we achieved 4%, check the box and
Right.
move on. You need to continue to invest in your people.
Right.
What does that look like from the best examples that you've seen? that continuing education, continuing investment so that we can continue to be on offense, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, really, ultimately, what's interesting is that it's kind of like the employees just want to be continually developed, and they want to keep learning and keep growing. And whenever people hear that, especially like leaders of the organization, it stresses them out because they're like, listen, we can't have 1,000 CEOs. Like, there's only going to be one CEO. Like, I can't only promote people so much. And so what I say to that is, yeah, for sure. It's not your job to figure out what happens after they've achieved these goals of their own, or they felt like they've like learned and become more proficient in different things. It's your job to give them the tools and just see, let the chips fall where they may. There always are going to be people who quit, and there always are going to be people who stay, and and you just have to accept that you will have a nice alumni base of people that think positively about your organization. But when you focus on developing each person as like a strategy for growth, that has a ton of benefits for the organization. And you just can't get caught up in like what happens later, because um it's just not it's not it will things will happen, but those same things will happen regardless. If you so one of the things that like I always talk about is in the old days. So I'm Gen X, and so I've always been working for baby boomers, right? In the old days, the perspective was, well, professional development is the responsibility of the employee. I'm not going to pay for you to get better at your job, because then you'll just be more valuable and expensive and you'll leave. And that was kind of the perspective when I grew up. But the research shows that actually it's the opposite, that Gen Z now expects professional development at their employer. And if you don't provide it, they will leave. And if you do provide it, they will stay much longer. And they don't, because guess what? It becomes an advantage if your company is investing a lot in their professional development and other companies aren't, right? It's a huge advantage for them to stay. And the other thing I'll add is, I think when you're doing a lot of development of the individual, um, what was I going to say? When you're developing the sorry, no. When you're developing the individual, they're less likely to leave and they're more likely to stay, and it all ends up being a much better scenario. And right, here's my point. You might want to edit some of this because I sort of lost my thought. But here's
Fun
the thing.
fact, this is a live show. We don't
Yeah.
edit.
Oh,
It's not
great.
live. We don't edit. So this is
Oh,
Francie, real
great.
and
I'm
raw,
so
and I
happy.
love it.
Oh, fab. So so when this is an epiphany I had the other day. If you are miserable at your job and someone offers you $1 more per hour, you will take it.
Yep.
If you love your job and someone offers you $1 more per hour, you will not take that, because you're so happy with what's going on. You have so many opportunities. You're able to like grow and create new areas for this organization. You're like doing way more than all of your peers are doing. Why would you leave for $1 more an hour? And so as that mindset, I think you really have to understand is like, maybe you're not promoting people, but you're giving them more opportunity to make an impact and be creative, and do a little bit more maybe than even their what do you call it? Their job description is, but it keeps them engaged, and who knows what benefits that's going to bring to the company. And I just think you have to allow a little bit more creativity, um, but otherwise, I just think there's really no downside. It's just getting over the initial cost. But like I say, I mean, there's a ton of research about the ROI. So I think once you get educated, then it's hard to have a problem with paying for
Yeah,
it.
I agree with you, and I've honestly found the exact same thing with my own businesses, with clients. It's if you people really want two things, and if you could do these two things really well, you pretty much lock that person in your organization, as long as they don't have one of those life events, right? They have to move or
Mhm.
retire, whatever.
Right.
Um, the first is everything we're talking about here. You invest in the human being, and you really show them the path to their own personal development, personal and professional growth. They don't have to be the CEO. And most people don't want to be the CEO. They just want to know that they're improving on a personal level, and they have that flexibility and creativity, like you said, to operate within the organization. The second thing is, if they are tied to the company's mission and vision, and they really believe in where that company is
Right.
going, it is very, very hard to even poach that individual.
Right.
for headhunters,
Right.
recruiters, and other
Right.
companies
Right.
to come and steal that employee, that team member. And if you could do those two things really well, like business gets really easy. And people always push back when I say that, but I've seen it time and time again, and it sounds like you have too. It's
Yeah.
just the path for success.
Yeah, and it's I think it's really I think for people that haven't been in an organization like that, it's just a little bit of a mindset shift.
Yeah.
And you can always one of the things that we also like to do is you can always do like a little beta and
Mhm.
just see for yourself if this works with your people, and just like a small group and test it out. And you want to do all the things right where you have a control group and you do surveys before and after, and then you look at like the metrics of the organization over the same period of time. That's the real key, is like if you're able to come up with a relatively decent comp and see what's changing, like are fewer people leaving in the group that got the coaching, or what's happening to different metrics in the group that got the coaching, or what's happening to the organization. And so I just think I would just say, like, if you don't really believe it, but you're kind of curious about the ROI argument, you can just test it in small batches.
Yeah. Or is everybody in the control group now jealous of the people in the beta group? That's a good metric.
Exactly, exactly. Well, and that's what happened at that in that Colorado thing, is that
Oh,
because
really?
it was opt-in, and people who were like, I'm not doing this, started to see that the people who were doing it were like being very successful at their jobs, or they had good strategies, or they were kind of like able to come up with solutions that kind of people started to admire. Then other people came in and it was a little bit like FOMO.
Mhm.
But again, it's like so much better to come to something where you're like curious than sort of our arms folded and
Yeah.
angry, and like have to do it.
Mhm. I 100% agree. Francie, we could talk all day about this
Yeah.
because I absolutely love it, and I wish more people, more leaders knew about it and actually invested in it, but they can. So I'm going to
Yeah.
put your website on the screen. Talk to me
Yeah.
about what people can do and will do once they get to your website, and how they can invest in group coaching.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I'm really proud of on the website is that because it's my own company, right? I did all the things that like I really thought was right, that I thought were right. And one is that we list the name and photo and professional information, and link to all the coaches' information. And the idea there is that we really want to be in the business of group coaching. And just to kind of get back to the financial side, so like if you're an expert coach, you're charging somewhere between $300 to $1,000 an hour. Typically, if you have one-on-one coaching, that's with a CEO type level. It's very expensive, right? But if you have 20 people, if it's one coach, 20 people, and you divide by 20, it's a very affordable rate, and it's a much better investment than going to sending those people to conferences, which is typically what their professional development is. And so we really focus on the group. However, if you want us to help us find you a one-on-one coach, we will do that. But anyway, my point is, like, you can go to our website, and we have almost 100 coaches. We're always adding new coaches, and you can find cool people and find their professional website and hire them directly. I mean, one of my things is I'm not trying to keep the coaches under wraps, because again, like, I think a rising tide lifts all boats. Like, I'm not trying to take advantage of anyone, and I'm not trying to dominate them, right? And so my relationship with coaches is just a revenue share. And so one of the ways that I wanted to give value to coaches to join the organization was to like provide links to their content and their you know professional stuff, so LinkedIn, their website, whatever. And that was really valuable for them, and that was great for me, because as a marketplace owner, I want people to come and not leave. Because if you keep having people come and then leave, like, you don't really have a marketplace, right? You got to have some few people here and there. But that's one thing on the website that's cool. If you just go to the coaches page, you can scroll down and see there's just all kinds of different people, and my the way I say about it is I think it's like all the stars in the sky. I mean, there's all kinds of different people with all kinds of backgrounds, and they have so much to offer. And that's why we think that, like, there'll always be someone for a buyer, who has the appropriate background. Okay, so that's one side of the website. And then there's a get in touch page where you can set up a call with me, or join a newsletter. And we have a lot of video on there, and we have some data page, and some pricing, just to give you a sense. I mean, one of the things also that goes on that's interesting about coaching is that when you think about, oh, well, I just want a coach who costs, whatever you come up with, let's say $200 an hour. the thing to remember with coaching is that it's not just the time you're with the coach that you're paying for, you're also paying for their preparation time. And so that's why this is kind of a elite benefit. And so that's why you really want to, in my opinion, do the group, because it's just much more effective in terms of you're putting your dollars to work. And then the other part is like with one-on-one coaching, it's very intimate, right? You might be getting into all sorts of things and talking about fears or very personal things. So it's like a combination of work and personal. And that's obviously a big trade-off for group. But one of the benefits with group is that you learn from your peers and you start to learn like mindset shifts where like, oh, wow, that fear I have, everyone else in this group also has that. It's just a human fear. It's just a human way of dealing with stuff. And you realize like, oh, actually, like that's like really common among my peers. I hadn't realized that. Like no one has talked about it. And that also just like I think creates more trust in the organization.
Yeah, I love it. Well, the website's on the screen. It's in the show notes down below, wherever you're watching or listening. Terawatt.co, Terawatt.co. Francie, thank you so much for being here. This was a great episode.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
For those of you watching, listening, thank you for being here as well. We'll see you on the next episode of Harmonious at Lunch.
Another episode of Harmonious at Lunch in the books. I hope this episode made you think and you grabbed some actionable ideas to propel your business. Don't forget to like, comment your takeaways, and subscribe wherever you're listening so we can help more entrepreneurs just like you achieve harmony in your life and business.